So welcome to our second episode of Weird, Wild, and Wonderful Illinois. Today we are talking with Greg Olson, who has been on the board of directors for the Morgan County Historical Society for, about the last 40 years. So he knows a little bit about Morgan County history. And today we're going to learn a little bit more about the Morgan County Historical Society and some of the weird and wild and crazy stories that we might not have heard before out of Morgan County. So welcome, Greg.
Yeah, good to see you, Miranda. Uh, I hope State Historical Society viewers enjoy what I have to say.
Yeah.
As we had previously discussed, something I thought I would talk a little bit about, not that I'm an expert on this, but one of the more bizarre stories in Morgan County history was the disappearance of a man in 1959 from a motel in Jacksonville.
Okay.
Yeah, so his name was Bruce Campbell Sr. And in April of 1959, he and his wife drove from Northampton, Massachusetts to Jacksonville to visit their son, who was
Mhm.
a chemistry instructor. I'm not sure if he was a professor or not, but he was in a chemistry instructor at McMurray College,
Okay.
which is now closed.
Yeah.
But they checked into a motel which no longer exists out on West Walnut Street in the north west part of Jacksonville.
Hmm.
It was called the Sandman Motel. And the story goes that in the night, Mr. Campbell told his wife that he was worried that he hadn't locked their car. And she talked him out of going to the car to check.
Hmm.
But early in the morning, like around 2 o'clock, 2:15, she woke up and he was gone. Well, the weird part of the story is that his car was still there. His car keys were still there.
Hmm.
His wallet and all of his money was still there. And he walked away in the night in his green monogram pajamas with, and he left his shoes or slippers behind.
Hmm.
And so the police were called, of course. I don't know if they waited 24 hours like they do now, but the police were informed that he disappeared.
Hmm.
So they spent a week, state police, Illinois State Police, Morgan County Sheriff's deputies, Jacksonville Police, McMurray College students, and at that time, McMurray had just been co-ed for a couple of years. So there were over 200 male students that
Hmm.
helped with the search. Um, but they never found any trace of him. So back in 2001, I wrote a story for the Jacksonville Journal Courier about this disappearance. Other people have written about it over the years. In fact, it's even been in Reader's Digest uh, with under unexplained mysteries or something like
Hmm.
that. But in 2001, I talked to retired Jacksonville police officer and longtime police chief Charles Runkle,
Uh-huh.
and he was a patrolman back in 19 no he was a captain on the police force in 1959 and soon to be named chief. But
Hmm.
he told me there were all sorts of theories um, as to what happened to this man, including that he may have fallen into an abandoned well. Well,
Okay.
all these years later, and now 66 years have passed.
Hmm.
There's never been any trace of him. Even his hometown newspaper back in Massachusetts put reporters onto the story to see
Hmm.
if they could track his whereabouts. Of course, this is long before there was the internet and other means of trying to track people down. And
Hmm.
but there's never been any finding of his remains. So they even put a boat. The fire department in Jacksonville even took a rescue boat to a rather narrow creek that flows. It mostly flows from east of Jacksonville to the Illinois River, and they took this boat down a
Mhm.
rain-swollen Movistar Creek for miles, looking for his body, thinking he
Mhm.
may have fallen
Yeah.
into the creek. Which the creek from the motel was probably maybe a mile away to the north
Hmm.
of the motel, but yeah, it's an interesting story, and as I said, other people have written about this. So, uh, and it probably has been on national news broadcasts over the years. Just under unexplained
Yeah.
stories, mystery stories. But I don't know a lot more details about it. But it 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 baffled investigators for years, and is probably one of the more famous mysteries in Morgan County history, certainly
Mhm.
Jacksonville's history. So
Yeah. They now Morgan County, I know Jacksonville just celebrated its bicentennial of,
right.
it was
Mm-hmm.
founded in 1825. Was Morgan County founded before or after Jacksonville then?
No, Morgan County was founded in 1823.
Okay.
It was separated from Greene County.
Hmm.
So
And back then they still had, Scott County was part of it.
right. Well, when Morgan County was formed in 1823, it included the land which is now Cass County,
Hmm.
all of Cass County, and all of Scott County.
Right.
Those counties weren't formed until the late 1830s. Cass in 1837, and Scott County was formed in 1839.
Yeah.
So
So we've got 200 years worth of history in Jacksonville and surrounding towns that um,
right.
and it just it as far as like this is a disappearance from the 1950s, which we feel like okay, that's kind of a long time ago, but it's really really recent in
Oh,
Jacksonville
sure.
history. you know
Well, it's kind of hard for me to believe that it was 24 years ago. Almost 25 years ago that I wrote a story about it, because it doesn't seem that long ago. So, but yeah, that's one of the more interesting stories. Another one that I had previously mentioned to you, that crime stuff always fascinates people. I never wrote
Mhm.
a lot about crime stories, but I did write a story which garnered a lot of attention back in 2002. I wrote a
Mhm.
piece for the Journal Courier, a history feature about jailbreaks.
Okay.
It mainly focused on one particular jailbreak from the old Morgan County Jail, which is long gone. It was torn
Mhm.
down. It was built in 1864 in Jacksonville, near downtown, just south of the square. Uh, an Italianate style building, which also was the sheriff's residence originally for many
Okay.
years, the front part of the building. It was a two-story brick building um, with the decorative corbels or cornice brackets that
Hmm.
people are familiar with. Um, but over the years in that building, which was the jail for 120 years, so hard to believe,
Yeah.
especially given the fact that even as far back as the late 1800s, uh, the people in the county were complaining about the condition of the jail, and that it
Hmm.
wasn't suitable for prisoners. So over the years, there were a number of jailbreaks,
Hmm.
but in 1950 occurred one of the more daring escapes, where a handgun had been smuggled up to the prisoners, and when
Mhm.
one of the jailers went to place a prisoner back into his cell, um, he was struck over the head by another prisoner who reached through the bars, I guess, and hit him in the head, and
Mhm.
and I guess rendered him unconscious. I don't remember all of those details, but they subdued him, and then they got the jail keys. There were four prisoners being held
Mhm.
there at the time, so they got the jail keys and let out two other prisoners. So
Mhm.
there were four of them,
Mhm.
and they three of them went. They all left the jail. One of them left on foot and separated from the other three,
Mhm.
and the three of them they stole a car. They stole a 1950 Mercury that was in a an alley close to the jail. I don't know where
Mhm.
it was exactly, but
Yeah.
they stole it, and then there was a high speed chase through the county. They headed out toward Ashland,
Mhm.
and the cops were quickly in pursuit, and they even had radio broadcasts go out. But Charles Runkle, I talked to him again, and he was a
Mhm.
patrolman at that point. He'd just been on the Jacksonville police force, but state police and Morgan County Sheriff's deputies.
Mhm.
There wouldn't have been those forces at that time. Those police forces were pretty small compared to today, but they wound up chasing him, or chasing the stolen car and the three escaped prisoners out, and they caught him. I think the car was they ran it off the road around Illinois routes 123 and 125,
Okay.
which is
Yeah.
east of Ashland.
Mhm.
Yeah, between Ashland and Pleasant Plains.
Mhm.
And it was in November of the year, but they chased him through a cornfield on foot and caught him. And they caught those three there and took them back to the Morgan County Jail. And then the fourth guy, he didn't get very far, and they found him in down off of East State Street, like behind Centenary Methodist Church.
Okay.
What he was doing, he didn't get very far at all. So
Mhm.
none of them got very far. But Chief Runkle told me it was an exciting time, and newspaper accounts in 1950 said that it was probably one of, even though it only lasted like 3 hours, the
Mhm.
manhunt, but it was one of the more extensive manhunts, because they got, the cops had radio
Yeah.
at that time, and they were able to get broadcast out. That
Mhm.
see, and part of the reason and that it was exciting was they before they left the jail, they stole shotguns and a rifle, so
Mhm.
that they were armed, and but they didn't put up a fight. Um, but there were other jail escapes over the years. There were some guys one time got up into the attic of the jail, and they took a knife and cut through. It must have taken them quite a while, but they cut through the roof, and
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, and took blankets and made a rope blanket and escaped. And then there was another time. I think that was in 1913, and in 1927 there were five guys that escaped, but I was never able to find out whether they were ever captured. And
Mhm.
they busted a hole through, somehow they got out of their cells. Oh, I know. Those were the guys who fashioned a key from a metal frame from a bed. They were able to fashion something that opened a cell door,
Mhm.
and where the jailers were, I have no idea. But then they busted a hole through a brick wall, and they used rope blankets too. But I'm not sure if that was the largest escape that I know about in
Mhm.
terms of number of prisoners. But Whether they were ever captured, I have no idea. So, and that was in 27. But there were other cases, you know. It's amazing that jail, when I was growing up, because when the jail closed, I was like 23 years old.
Hmm.
The old jail closed. And it's amazing that having gone through there before they tore it down, it's amazing that it was suitable for any prisoner. Well, it was in such deplorable condition. And
Yeah.
so, but those are two, though, the disappearance of that man in 1959 and
Mhm.
the jailbreak story, those are two of the more interesting ones. But over the years, there have been a lot of interesting stories, and
What what is a myth about Morgan County or Jacksonville area that people still think is true, and
oh
you keep having to say, no, this didn't really happen. No, this, happened differently than what you've been told. Is there any, prevailing myths out there that,
well, I try to dispel some of that stuff. There's a building on South Diamond Street, not
Mhm,
far from the McDonald's, which was a private psychiatric hospital for many years. But
mhm,
I've had people argue with me and say it was a tuberculosis sanitarium. Well, there was a tuberculosis sanitarium in Morgan County, but it was out on the east edge of town, out off of East Morton.
mhm,
That's one of the things people, and one thing that I hear over the years, people will they'll discover like old coal chutes that are off their 19th century house, and
mhm,
they'll think that they were actually tunnels, that because of the way it's formed, they'll say
mhm.
that there were tunnels. Uh, I've heard tunnels more than anything over the years that are all over Jacksonville. Supposedly, I've heard people say there was one from the Illinois School for the Deaf superintendent's house to the main
Mhm.
building, but I've heard people that worked at ISD for years say, no, that's not true. Plus, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense. Plus, the
Mhm.
tunnel would have had to have been like over 100 yards long, and why really
Yeah.
build it? But I've talked to people that lived in that house, and they were like, we've heard that story, but we never saw any indication in our foundation that there was a tunnel that led,
Mhm.
you know. Um, it just, some of that stuff just doesn't make sense. So there were tunnels underneath or behind the old main building at the Jacksonville State Hospital,
Mhm.
the building where Elizabeth Packard once lived.
Mhm.
But and those tunnels existed and may still be there. I'm not sure, but they were service tunnels that went to other buildings
Mhm.
on the Jacksonville State Hospital property, which in more recent years, before it closed, it was the Jacksonville Developmental Center.
Mhm.
So it was a mental hospital from 1851 until 2012.
Mhm.
But as far as tunnels like Underground Railroad tunnels, I those are things that I've heard over the years that I don't have any proof that they existed. And
Mhm.
um, there are or were a number of Underground Railroad sites in the Jacksonville area that are
Mhm.
documented. Um, there's not a lot of documentation, but given the fact that it was a secretive network. Um, there were
Document it.
sure,
Yeah.
but the tunnels, yeah, that's one thing. And the thing about the psychiatric hospital being a tuberculosis center, no,
Yeah.
I because I've looked into that, and uh, yeah, I do know that the Jacksonville State Hospital would occasionally they would treat tuberculosis patients, but for the most part, it was a mental health facility.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah,
I'm sure there are other things that come up. One thing that's interesting to me over the years, in more recent years, people have come up with these ghost stories, which I love a good ghost story, but
yeah.
some of these stories that are connected to, like Illinois College, for example, they're easily disproven
Mm-hmm.
because the problem with at least one of those that I can think of is that they mention people that were they mention historical figures that I know that's not what happened to them,
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but no, I don't really know of any other mysteries or that come to mind or myths. I'm sure there are some out there, but people make claims that they'll make claims about the streetcar line, like that the rails were electrified. Well, that's not true. It was a trolley system that
Yeah.
there were wires that provided the electricity that powered the motor.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that you'll see, and that there was a round table on West State Street where the cars could turn around. I've heard that one. Well, that's not true. There was a wide spot in the road, but that's where the cars could meet. They could pass each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it just separated. Yeah. And that space, that even though the streetcars haven't run in Jacksonville since 1930, the 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 curb is still, it's a wider spot in on West State Street where they could pass. The rails are long gone, but
Yeah. Now, I also know, and I learned about this on your cemetery walk actually earlier this year, was the um, disputing the fact that Jacksonville was actually named after Andrew Jackson, the president, and he was possibly named after a different Andrew Jackson who was buried there in Jacksonville.
right. Well, there was a young black man. I don't know if he was an indentured servant or slave, because I don't know the history of slavery in Illinois, whether it was still legal, but in 1825, when the surveyors were laying out Jacksonville,
Mm-hmm.
the story goes there was this young African American boy.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was like 11 years old or something, but he was running an errand for his owner or his employer. And I word it that way because I'm not clear as to what he was. I do believe he was a slave at the time, but anyway, the town was being platted,
Mm-hmm.
surveyed, and he stopped. The young African American was Andrew Jackson, and he stopped and talked to the surveyors, and they asked him his name, and he told them, and they said, "Oh, well, we think that's a great name, and we're going to name the town after you."
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem I have with that, and this doesn't, I don't want to sound racist, but it has more to do with the fact that I doubt if the surveyors, first of all, named the town. I think the town was probably already named. To
Mm-hmm.
my knowledge, there's no record of whether the commissioners that at the time, whether they um, chose the site and the name for the town,
Mm-hmm.
but um, I think the town had already been named, but not having any real proof of that. So years later, after this happened, in the 1880s, there was a book published about early Jacksonville, which
Mm-hmm.
was only like 60 years old at that point.
Yeah.
But Reverend Jackson he became a local minister, and he told the story for the people who were compiling stories for the book, and he told that story. And to my knowledge, that's the first time it ever appeared in print and
Mm-hmm.
was readily available to the public. Um, but yeah, that's a problem I have. See, another part of that story is that despite what is on Wikipedia, which says Jacksonville was founded by New Englanders, which is
Mm-hmm.
not true. It was founded by people from Tennessee and Kentucky and
Mm-hmm.
Virginia, mostly people that settled in Morgan County in the early days were Kentuckians
Mm-hmm.
for the vast majority of those people. So those people worshipped Andrew Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
and who was the hero of the War of 1812. He was not elected president. He was not president at the time. I think in 1825, it may have been John Quincy Adams, but
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was. But anyway, but Jackson was a well-known figure and a Southerner, and the chances of it being named after a boy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not to disparage him. And that young man went on to be a very well-known, prominent uh, minister in Jacksonville, and
Mm-hmm.
Protestant minister. I think he was a Baptist minister. And but for many years, his grave in Jacksonville Cemetery was unmarked. So back, I don't know, probably 30 years ago, a group raised some money, including the Morgan County Historical Society, and put a marker up for him.
Mm-hmm.
He was an alderman back, I think, in the 1870s, and is believed to be, it could be proven, that he was the first African American alderman
Yeah.
in Jacksonville history. Yeah. So, but his name was the same as the more famous Andrew Jackson, President Andrew Jackson. So that's that story
Mm-hmm.
in a nutshell.
Well,
So
yeah. There's all kinds of great history coming out of Morgan County over
yeah.
the years. So, um, now, if people wanted to get a hold of the Morgan County Historical Society, how can they do that?
Well, probably the best way, and I don't have a phone number handy,
Mm-hmm.
is to contact Karen Seibert. She handles questions for the Historical Society,
Okay.
um, but I don't have her email handy
Mm.
um, and her number. But contacting her through email would probably be best.
Okay.
The
And
Historical Society doesn't is not quite as active as it used to be. This
mm-hmm.
past year, we or I held 3 cemetery tours in recognition of Jacksonville's 200th anniversary, and
Mm-hmm.
those were well sponsored by the County Historical Society.
Yeah.
And there's a Chautauqua that's held usually around Labor Day every year. In recent years, it's been held at the Nichols Park Pavilion.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be speakers and music, and yeah. So that's one of the main things we do is programs. It's a membership organization,
Mm-hmm.
um, but um, yeah, Karen, if you can get through to her,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's the best. That's the best way.
Alrighty. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, good luck with the rest of your vignettes.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much.